Hi, everybody in podcast land and also on YouTube. I'm James.
I'm David.
I'm Sarah.
I'm Riley.
There's 4 of us?
What?
No way!
And this is the Carpool Critics movie podcast, where today we're obviously recruiting extra talent to help us discuss Hereditary, this amazing, in my opinion, movie from, what's this guy? Ari Aster.
Ari Aster. And don't forget, spoiler alert! There's going to be spoilers.
And decapitation.
Ooh.
David, what do you give this movie out of 10?
Hereditary is the kind of horror movie even Kubrick would love. It's scary how good it is. 9.3 out of 10.
Wow. I knew someone was going to mention Kubrick. It took about 5 seconds.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. This is so
this is
Wait,
gonna be
good.
great.
Riley, is this your first time watching it?
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
I'm so excited
Previously,
to
I
enlighten
watched
you.
half of it, and then we stopped because we didn't have time to finish it or something, and
Or
I
you're a
never got to
bitch.
finish it until now.
But you've seen also Midsommar.
Yes.
I call it Midsommar. I don't say Midsommar. I don't like
Me
that.
neither.
Midsommar.
So give us your rating.
Oh, over to me now. I wish Ari Aster, asshole, would have conducted a seance to summon a film writing demon.
Ooh.
Because Hereditary's exploration of the generational effects of mental illness and family dysfunction are exchanged for a bargain bin demonic cult slasher, which is a shame because Toni Collette did a bang-up job.
You don't know what a slasher is, do you?
Horror thing, 6.75 out of 10.
6.75. Okay.
Yep.
He likes the movie.
I struggled with what to rate it, and that's what I settled on. Not slasher, sorry, demonic cult.
It's like a horror drama.
Yeah, cheesy, campy horror.
It's a horrorama.
There you go.
Sarah, our resident expert, give us your
All right.
rating, your high-minded, informed rating.
Okay. After my 4th viewing, I've determined Ari Aster's Hereditary is a modern-day masterclass horror film that leaves me with only one question and one question only. Where the heck does Charlie keep getting chocolate from? 9 out of 10.
Your mom doesn't even know. Hey,
Is that nuts in it?
She summons it from a portal.
I actually think that's
In her
a great
own mind.
question.
I
And I think it actually is it's germane to the whole theme of the movie, which is like how disconnected all the characters are. They don't talk to each other and know what's going on with each other. So I think that totally fits. But here's my slogan. Hereditary combines shocking visuals, psychological storytelling, and inspired cinematography to herald a new wave of quote-unquote high horror. 9 out of 10. I love this movie.
Wow.
So good.
Oh, man, I got my work cut out for
We're
me.
gonna enlighten you, Riley. You have
man.
no idea.
No. I have every idea. I totally understand everything already, okay?
I have a
but-
feeling that you do like this movie. You just don't like horror movie. And so all the stuff that makes this movie special, a lot of it's just lost on you because it's not what you want out of a movie.
But that's not what his slogan said.
Well, that is a real possibility. I don't watch a ton of horror movies, but I think we'll get into this, but I think the main reason I was really disappointed was because it was so good for like half or like getting up to like 3/4 maybe. And I was so disappointed by the conclusion and the ending that I think it just soured the whole thing for me. Like, we're going to talk about the masterful setting the mood that Ari Aster did, the acting performances, the set design, the music. Everything is so great for so much of this movie. And I left it being so disappointed that it just soured it. So
Interesting.
we'll get into it.
Oh, yes, we will. Right after this message from our sponsor, Hail Pieman. We're brought to you by Manscaped. Hail! We're brought to you by the Manscaped Performance Package Kit, which comes with a ton of stuff, including their lawnmower, waterproof trimmer, and advanced skin-safe technology, which helps reduce nicks and cuts. And if there's anything I hate, it's nicks. All of them, even Nicholas's.
Stevie Nicks?
It also has
New York Knicks?
It has a crop preserver, which crop preserver is the name for their ball deodorant. I put this on when I want my wife to notice me. The Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer, and their new Shears 2.0 luxury nail kit. Yeah, you can tell a lot about a person from their nails. So head to manscaped.com/carpool20 today and get 20% off, plus free international shipping. And you'll get their Shed travel bag. And I can tell you, that thing has got a good zipper on it. Plus a pair of anti-chafing boxer briefs, which my wife wears to bed. And it's all just available for a limited time. So do it.
Got a lot of personal details here.
Well, that's what you get when you send me the stuff.
That's right.
I actually try it out. We're also brought to you by Private Internet Access VPN. PIA helps you hide your true IP address so that you can bypass geo restrictions and censorship and other uncool stuff. You can connect up to 10 devices at once, and it includes an internet kill switch. If your VPN gets disconnected involuntarily. PIA is available for Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, and even has a goddamn Chrome extension, so check it out at lmg.gg/carpoolcritics.
I had to practice that to make sure I could do the noise.
I thought you were going to do the self-decapitation.
Well, I kind of did a thing on the other one, so I was like, I gotta... It worked. You guys were shocked.
That was a good clip.
I'm a horror master.
That was a good cluck. Very creepy. I got goosebumps.
I know everything about horror.
If you haven't seen it since, I don't know, theaters, what happens in this movie, Riley?
Let me tell you. After the death of her estranged mother, miniatures artist Annie struggles with her family's history of mental illness and the burden of motherhood. One night, her son Peter reluctantly takes his younger sister Charlie to a high school party at Annie's request, leading to a fatal accident where Charlie has an allergic reaction to a slice of cake and... as Peter races her to the hospital, she's decapitated by a telephone pole. That was a bit confusing.
Big moment for the audience there. You either laughed or gasped.
Haunted by the accident, Peter starts hearing the noise that Charlie used to make, and Annie befriends a woman from her grief support group, Joan. Tensions in the family rise as Annie and Peter blame each other for Charlie's death. Joan convinces Annie to join her in a seance to communicate with Joan's dead son, and they actually do so. Annie ends up contacting Charlie in the same way, frightening both her husband and Steve. Annie ends up contacting Charlie in the same way, frightening both her husband, Steve, and Peter with her apparent mania. Going through her mother's old things, Annie finds a book of incantations intended to allow a demon called King Payman to possess a young, preferably male, body. She also finds a photo album revealing that her mother and Joan were close friends before finding her mother's headless body in the attic. At school, Peter sees Joan yelling at him from across the street and is forced by a demonic presence to break his own nose. In an attempt to protect the family from whatever is haunting them, Annie burns Charlie's sketchbook, but in doing so, burns Steve alive for some reason. Peter wakes up in his bed and is pursued by his now possessed mother into the attic, where he sees horrifying visions and jumps out of the window to his death. His body is possessed by Charlie's spirit and joins the cultists in the treehouse, where they worship him as Payman incarnate. And they all lived happily ever after. Great ending. I love how the protagonist really realizes their journey, and we get this exegesis, this fulfillment of all the things we don't get any of that.
You do get a bit of that.
Absolutely.
It's a tragedy. She tries to burn the book. That's her final push. That's her last hurrah. She thinks she's sacrificing herself for the family.
Right.
And then I love that scene where she's just like saying goodbye to her husband. She's kissing him. And then she thinks because of previously when she tried to burn the book, her sleeve caught on fire. She thinks that she's going to sacrifice herself. But instead, when they toss the book in, her husband gets engulfed in flames and immolated. And when I was in the theater seeing that, I was just like almost just clapping. I almost did that.
Wait. See, but all I felt in that moment was, what the fuck? Why is he on fire? She totally explained the whole connection between her and the sketchbook, and we saw it.
No, because she misunderstands what the demons want or what they're doing there. She misunderstands how the magic works.
So why did she start catching fire when the book started catching fire?
Because they didn't want to destroy the book right away. It's like,
so wait,
it's
the ghost
king
can
of
just
mischief.
the ghost can just put anyone on fire who they want to?
You have to invite them into their life. So I did an
What do you mean?
unnatural amount of
He
research.
didn't invite her
Oh,
in.
let me tell you about my research
Oh
into
my
the
God.
occult.
Yeah.
I looked into a bunch of articles about like how this movie is tied to the occult, and like it's all based on like real mythology or whatever. I read articles that spell magic with a CK, so you know they're legit.
Oh yeah.
And so all of this stuff, even when they're communicating with the grandson or Charlie, that's not really communicating with them. That's inviting the demons into their life. And so what they've basically done is like the people have done those seances, all those things to allow the demons to have a foothold in that home and that in their
Right.
lives. So the demons have a lot of power over that family.
I got that.
And so that they can do what they want because they've been invited in.
I got that, but I think the problem that I have there is when a movie sets up an internal logic and then breaks it. And the
I don't
logic
think it's
that
breaking it. I think you're just misunderstanding the logic.
well,
that
okay,
was
what's-
set up.
It's subverting it because
So what's the logic then that the demons can just set anyone on fire anytime?
I did research on King Payman, like
Okay.
the actual demon from hell.
The
Because,
real demon that exists.
Yes, just to see where Ari Aster was taking inspiration from for this
Right.
movie. And Payman is actually a demon based around nature and the elements. So earth, air, fire, and water.
Lightning.
Then the Fire Nation attack.
So
friendship.
Essentially, he can control those things. Fire, for example, you see that when Annie first catches on fire, and then since the whole movie is based around destiny and not having control of what happens to them, Payman decides that he doesn't want to kill Annie yet, so he kills the husband instead, and that's why he catches on fire.
Okay, so like after the fact, after you watch the movie, you can like look up all this stuff and be like, oh, Payman can control anything. But then if he can control anything, why doesn't he just make it happen by himself? Why does he need these cultists to run around and
he
psychologically
can't do
terror-
everything.
Yeah, the demons need to be invited in. There's like they can't just like step in and have power. They need to be given power by the people inviting them
Okay,
into
so why
our
didn't he just incinerate them as soon as they did the seance?
Because he
He
doesn't
needs
want
them.
that. He wants that body, and he was in Charlie's body, or he had some portal into Charlie's body. And so when they died, they switched their plan to get him into a male host, which is what he always wanted. And so this is all like a dynamic plan, and it's like you think that that is adhering to rules where so he doesn't want that book to be burned because that's like a totem of power. That's like part of the way he has a
Payman doesn't want the book to be burned?
Yeah, because that's like part of how he's grasping into our realm. And so if it's destroyed, that's not helpful. It's not the end, but it wouldn't be helpful. And he's not ready to take full control of Annie yet. And so they need to like get further down the road of Annie's possession so that
Wait.
That's why he doesn't want. So he scares her because he doesn't want to destroy the book.
So wait, Payman's in Annie.
Not necessarily Payman. It might be like another.
No, I think it makes
secondary
sense
demon.
that Payman would be in Annie because she kills herself in the attic, and then that's why his spirit can go into.
I believe.
But it's Charlie.
Okay, at the beginning of the movie.
Oh man, Charlie is linked with Payman. That's a thing, right?
Yeah,
Charlie-
Payman
yes.
is inhabiting Charlie at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
So
100%.
annoying. This is so
Okay?
annoying. But you have to think about all this after
No,
the
you
fact.
don't. No, you don't, because you know that the grandmother was very attached to Charlie, and that's because Charlie, since birth, was initially King Payman.
Yeah, that's all in the movie, man.
100%.
Well,
So
I'm not saying it's not in the movie.
So Payman, you can see it when you're watching. When Payman inhabits Charlie, that's the beginning. Then Charlie dies, and you see that blue light all the time.
Yep.
That's when he's just like floating around, I guess.
Yeah.
Then when Steve gets engulfed in flames, that's when Annie gets taken over. You can see the blue light goes over her, and she's like, ugh. Then she gets taken over and does a bunch of mischief.
Yeah.
Then Peter gets driven insane and jumps out of his window. When he's lying on the ground in the lawn, you can still hear, I believe you can still hear Annie cutting her own head off.
Yep.
Then you hear her finish. There's
hear
silence, and the body hits the ground.
drops.
No,
Then
it's the
you-
head first. You hear the like head. It's like because you can hear it roll a little bit.
That's good. and then you see the blue light float out of the window because it has just left Annie's body and then inhabits Peter finally.
Yeah. See, okay, so you're making it make a little more sense, the kind of like logistics of how this all the
There's a lot.
the
There's
demon
truly a
possession
lot.
works. There's a checklist. We have to do it.
Yeah.
But I think that the real thing should we keep talking about what bothers me, or should we talk about what's
No.
Let's talk about the good.
You're talking about the awesome shit in this movie.
Okay, let's
so
talk
much
about
good.
the good stuff.
I knew this movie was
We'll get
awesome in
back
the
to
first 5 minutes of the movie because of the movie's opening image. I went in this completely blind. I didn't see the trailer or nothing. I'm sitting there in the theater, and the first image is of the treehouse. And when you see, you know how it is when you've seen movies before. You see that opening image, you're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be important later. So they're imbuing this like pretty much inert object. It's not a creepy treehouse. It's like actually kind of a nice postmodern treehouse.
nice.
But they're imbuing it with meaning just by virtue of placing it there, right?
Right.
And it also sets up a payoff we're going to see at the end because we're going to see a reversal where it's not an innocuous treehouse. It's glowing red.
Right.
It's like the site of ritual.
Normal treehouses do not glow red.
It's heat lamps, but it's okay. So then they zoom out and it starts to pan around the room, and then it's this one awesome oneer shot. And so now I'm thinking, this is sick cinematography. This is why it kind of conjures up like Kubrick-esque kind of nostalgia because it doesn't need to be there at all. This is not a normal slasher or horror movie.
No.
This is, I know horror fans are split on, and some hate the concept of high horror, but I think this is the kind of thing that pushes into that realm where you get this awesome shot that pans around a whole room, zooms in on this one particular dollhouse, does some kind of weird match frame where suddenly it's not a dollhouse, it's the actual set and we're in the world. That was amazing. But not only that.
Of that.
What?
The symbolism of that.
This is the other thing I was going to say. It sets up the themes of the movie because and characterization. We're learning, okay, we're in some kind of place where there's dollhouses, so I guess we know something about the main character. But then the themes, like why why are we always looking through miniatures? What does that
Right.
say? I heard the director said pretty explicitly it's because the characters don't have agency. It's because their like attachment to this demon is hereditary. It's passed down to them. There's like really nothing they can do with it. Their lives are the strings are being pulled by these greater beings that are outside of us. And so just in that first like 2 minutes, you get all of this.
Yeah.
And I was just ready.
Well,
Ready to clap again.
In the end of that shot, they set up the brilliant visual pattern that they're going to do for the movie. Basically, when people aren't aware of the spiritual realm, there's an unnatural amount of headroom. They shoot things where people are in like the bottom third of the frame, and there's 2 frames of like almost 2/3 of empty. There's usually a line separating the top third, and that's a consistent thing throughout the movie. And
I didn't notice that.
When the characters break through to the spiritual realm, when they're possessed or they're having this, they're often above that line, and that's a very consistent thing. When Toni Collette, there's a scene in the hallway, because it's the wood up to the 2/3 mark and then paint at the top. When she's kind of like just normal, she's below the line, and then she has a moment where she connects with Charlie's room and then steps above it. There's tons of like other scenes, like when they're having dinner and stuff. They're very consistent. Every time people aren't aware of the spiritual realm, there's way more headroom.
Yeah.
And it's like there's something going on that these people don't know, and they set it up in the first fucking shot.
It's almost as if there's other characters in the frame, but they're just
Totally.
invisible.
100%.
No, that's really great. I didn't pick up on that specifically, but like I do, like I said, the first half, 3/4 of this movie, I just like it feels. I agree with you, James, that like it sets it up right in the beginning that this is this is going to be a good movie. Like, it's like a lot of things that I can't even really express, but it has that feeling of quality.
I wonder if you feel like it doesn't satisfy on the thematic side because it doesn't really have answers for you. It's more just like an open exploration that ends with a epic horror showdown, but you feel like there's no closure to these arcs. There's no there's no agency to these characters. I wonder if you're kind of feeling that.
I will own up that it is definitely like a personal preference of mine for movies to have something to say that's concrete instead of like this movie has stuff to say, but my problem is that the stuff that it says is like an introduction, and there's no maybe there's a bit of like if we're talking about an essay, right? There's an introduction and there's maybe like half or 2/3 of the body, but then there's no real conclusion and there's no real elucidating, like diving into the issues even deeper. Like they put up the theme of hereditary trauma, they put up the theme of struggling with motherhood, and then they don't really say anything about it because the characters never get to a point where they can address it. Peter is this like stoned out loser bro, and he never really gets to a point where he confronts that fact or confronts anything beyond just kind of being scared and then dying.
But that is the message.
Yeah.
The message is
what's the message?
They don't confront their trauma. They don't have conflict with one another, and that leads them all to peril and death.
See, that would have been a great lesson that could be taken away from this movie if there was some character who didn't do that or who confronted something in some way.
But here's the thing is that, as mentioned before, James, you said like the dollhouse, going into the dollhouse at the very beginning is supposed to symbolize like outside forces manipulating what's actually happening in their lives.
Right.
But that's not the only time that you hear them talking about that. While Peter's in class as well, they're having a lesson about Astophanes or something, where he's also mentioning Hercules. He thinks that he's playing this game. He thinks that he has control over what's happening, but really he's being manipulated by these outside forces. And that's why you don't see the characters do the things that you want them to, because their destiny is already planned for them.
Yeah, you can actually hear the teacher say, "Murder was commanded by the gods."
Yeah. No, and that's a funny scene because, this is like it's a great trope when you're in a classroom and there's a lesson being taught and, the film doesn't pay specific attention to the lesson being taught, but it's in the background. You're like, this is probably something to do with the theme of the movie.
Well, it'd be such a missed opportunity if it wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the girls in the class says like, oh, so it's just, we're just pawns in a terrible, hopeless machine. So it's like, oh, there we go. There's the theme of the movie. My problem isn't necessarily that the characters don't do what I want them to do. My problem is that the characters lack agency, but that idea is presented and then just left.
I think each character serves as an exploration of different facets of the idea.
Do we want a character that says, hey, I'm going to fight this despite there being no agency, and then they fail regardless. But like none of the characters show a real understanding of what's going on.
I disagree. I think that Toni Collette's character does, but it's like her hereditary trauma goes so far that like she's hopeless from the beginning because she's the one with the most agency. She's the one that's actually trying to stop all this stuff.
Right.
But the message of the movie is that like you're pretty powerless against your like mental illness that's handed down by your.
But is it mental illness?
Well, it's not.
It's not. But
This is the other thing that I'm like, there was a potential here to talk about real world issues like mental illness and like struggling with motherhood. But instead, Ari Aster kind of uses this as like dressing on something where he just kind of wants to have a beautiful fuck up at the end. You know, like I wrote as Peter's going into the treehouse and he's like incarnate as Payman. I'm like, I appreciate the fucked up beauty of this whole situation. But, like, so what? Like, we're descending into madness, and what do we learn? That sometimes life sucks. This is a theme that keeps
like
recurring.
reducing what's going on, and I think like we should stick on some positive things for a little bit.
Let's go back to
I want to go to like
positive
the gushing. Like we've talked a little bit about the visual storytelling, but the idea of having her be a miniature maker is so brilliant because then you get all these like visual cues as to where her mental health is at. Like when she makes the diorama of her daughter's death, you're like, ooh, that's fucked up. But then they also use that later for foreshadowing when there's the shot over the car. And for like 5 frames, the head's gone. And so you're like, what does that mean? Why is the head gone from this diorama?
Right.
So we got foreshadowing there. And you can also see like, okay, instead of giving us all this backstory through flashbacks that a way worse movie would do, like most horror movies would have like the flashback of her holding her mother's hand in the hospice being like, I love you and hate you, mother. That's just, she does a little diorama and they talk about it
You
for
get
a second.
to go inside. You don't have to hear her in a monologue.
Totally.
You don't have to hear like a voiceover. It's totally visual, which is totally awesome.
No, I thought that was really cool too. Like the miniatures I think it was a great exploration of how they like compartmentalize things too. Like they don't tell each other.
Yeah.
So like there's so many parts where they're lying to each other. She says Annie tells her husband that she's going to the movies when she's going to the support group.
Yeah.
Steve gets a call from that saying that the grave was dug up and he withholds that information. So they're like compartmentalizing things in their own life in the same way that the miniatures have these like separate rooms.
But this is what I'm saying. That's how they're each a different aspect of the problem, because Steve, like, he kind of means well, but he's still not engaging with anybody else.
Yeah.
And then you've got the son, Peter. He's just like smoking pot and bottling everything up to the extent that he doesn't even tell his mom. He just lets his mom find her daughter's body.
Totally.
Holy crap. This movie goes there.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
No, that's a
Intense.
great moment. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then she's just angry. She's also not communicating with anyone, and when she does, she blows up at them. And it's just all these different facets of the same problem. So
Yeah.
I think I disagree with you that it's not very developed.
I don't think that the initial exploration is underdeveloped. I think that like what I'm trying to say is that there's so much groundwork laid, and there's so much quality up front that the payoff is not there.
I disagree, because I think that the final payoff is the punctuation on this full paragraph. That it's part of this, and like the intellectual journey is mostly over when the book is burnt and the husband's burned, but to like heighten the emotion, because like originally this was just a family drama, and he wrote in the horror stuff after. What it does is
It definitely feels like that.
It
feels like a family drama with horror tacked on the end.
I disagree. I think that it was tightly integrated into the beginning, and like it's a slow ramp up, and you don't really know when you get this like horrific sense of dread. Like we don't know what minute, what scene it is. You're like, this is all fucked up. But at some point,
When that head comes off, for sure.
yeah,
First time
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I
yeah.
saw that.
you're like, everything is building towards this thing, and it feels like we've been like, I feel like it's a earned payoff for all this insanity that we've seen.
Oh, going back to the miniatures for just 1 second. One other thing they did that I didn't notice in my first viewing is they brought in information we've already heard, because Annie says that I gave Charlie to my mother, and she says to Charlie, like, my grandma wouldn't even let me feed you. Grandma wanted to feed you.
Yeah.
And then the miniature shows the grandma beside Charlie with her breast out, like she's
So weird.
like literally wanted to breastfeed you.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
That's messed up.
I think that's Annie's way of like trying to understand everything that's happening in her life. Like that's just her way of feeling like she has control over everything that's going on.
The miniatures?
Yeah, exactly. Like it gives her this overview of everything that she's seen, just like the grandma standing in the door. You know that the grandma died with dissociative identity disorder as well as dementia. So that's Ari Aster playing on the mental illness and mental health. We also know that Annie's brother committed suicide because his mom or the grandmother was trying to put people inside of him.
Yeah, but this is all just their interpretation. Like, oh, she had, well, first of all, they just say DID, and you're like, it just totally goes over your head if you don't know what that is. It's split personality disorder, basically. And then, oh, my brother has schizophrenia. It's like, these are just their interpretations of actually they're possessed.
Exactly. Another thing, too, is I believe Ari Aster kind of intended on this movie being like a second watch type of a movie, because the first time you watch it, you're there kind of feeling what the family feels. You're part of the family and your view is with the family. Second time you watch it, you feel like you're more of part of the cult. Like you're just watching them go through all of these things that you know is going to happen.
Actually, I have a question for you there, because I felt a similar feeling. I felt this feeling both with my rewatch of Midsommar, which happened on Saturday, and my rewatch of Hereditary, which happened on Sunday. On both rewatches, I really had a different emotional experience, because on the first watch, which is always more emotional, I just had this dread and I was so unsettled, and I love that feeling that he was just able to get this very specific color of emotion in me that maybe I never felt before. But that was just absent on the next watches, because I just knew it was going to happen, and I'm just being more cerebral about it, and like watching Midsommar and thinking about how he's gaslighting her and stuff like that, and not thinking about like, wow, that guy's in a bear.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
He's in a bear.
Yeah.
All right, Midsommar, slight spoilers. We won't really spoiler that one. But.
Now I want to say this is interesting to me, because you say that I'm not a fan of horror, but I think one of the main reasons that I was disappointed by the ending is because it tarnishes the horror of the movie by telling us exactly what's going on. As you say, James, the best thing about horror to me is the dread, is the helpless, hopeless, just anxiety that you feel upon watching these people contend with forces beyond their control.
I couldn't disagree more. Please finish. This is psychology, all right?
Yeah. What we are scared of is the unknown. As soon as we find out what something is and we understand it and take it apart, then it's not scary anymore.
I think that you missed the point of the ending, though. That point of the ending isn't the horror. The point is like for you to feel how twisted it is, because like it's actually very much a release. If you're supposed to feel good when the happy music's playing, everyone's like, King Payman, there's no more dread, there's no more fear, there's no more pain. Everyone's like, King Payman.
No, and I did appreciate in the end the music is like triumphant.
Totally. And I think that's why it's so cool, is like it's not supposed to be like, oh God, we're gonna get Hereditary 2, like scary Return of the Payman. It's like, no, like this is like
Payman's revenge.
This is like, you in your head, you know how dark this is, but in your heart, you're like, this is happy. I feel good about this.
If you're a Satanist.
Yeah. No, I felt like on the emotional level, like the cues are there for a positive impact. Like it's warm lighting, everyone's smiling. There's weird nude people, sure, but maybe that's your thing.
You know what? I think,
but like the music, like it's on an emotional level. If you remove the intellectual aspect of it, you're like, this is kind of
their
like
suffering
nice.
is ended.
Yeah,
honestly,
the suffering's over.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it. You know, great. That's awesome. But I think that it's a mistake at the end of the day, because I'm not horrified by something that I fully understand. And like there were some problems with the logistics, and I want to know the steps and how to possess people and set people on fire or whatever. But like at the end, I know exactly what's going on. I'm like, oh, she's possessed, okay, and then he falls down, and then the spirit goes into him.
But Riley,
and this was all a scheme to get Payman into the body, and then they got him into the body. Okay, great. I'm not like my mind is not blown. Like before all that happens, I'm like, what is going on? What the fuck? Like maybe this is just me like liking and wanting more cosmic horror. Like I think you don't like Annihilation, the movie, as much, but like
I like the second half of Annihilation.
Right.
The first half is just very amateur.
Sure. But like the feeling that you get from Annihilation, where it's just like, you still don't understand at the end of the movie. You're like, but you understand enough for the journey to complete, but there's still so many unknowns, and there's like no unknowns in this one anymore.
But you like a good whodunit. You like Knives Out. In those movies, they wrap it all up in a nice bow.
Yeah, but
so what's the difference? Just genre?
Because the purpose of mystery is to fulfill the mystery, is to have that release of like, this is what happened and we know everything that happened now. Boom, there we go. That's the movie. But horror is supposed to leave you horrified.
Yeah, but
I wasn't. I mean, maybe
but that's just your expectation.
Maybe it's because I'm desensitized.
That's just your expectation. And I think like you went in expecting to like leave it bewildered. But that's not the intention of the director. Clearly, he's like, I want this to close. I want this to have an answer. And I want this to leave people like questioning kind of what they saw, but also having an understanding and thinking about it.
I was thinking about this movie for like 4 days after. And even on the rewatch, I was like, oh, my house is dark. Is the door locked?
I'll be honest too. My first experience watching this movie, I was like, what the fuck did I just watch? I was so confused. I had to watch an explanation video.
Right.
And then second watch, I started picking up on so many different things that honestly left me with such a different feeling. And I appreciated the movie a lot more. There was something else I wanted to mention too. Okay. With what David is saying is like, you do still get this like satisfaction at the end of like, you watch this family go through so much shit. Like they fight, and the horror of this movie is like, you find your comfort in your family, and then you see this family just like tear each other apart. And then at the end, you see Alex Wolff's character kind of like, well, obviously he died and he's reincarnate of Payman, but he has this family that like...
He's got a special family now.
Just all of the grief is like ended.
Yeah.
And he has his new family kind of.
I want to. So you're kind of criticizing the fact that the ending isn't horror, but I want to praise every horror bit before that, because like a lot of horror movies are like a burger and fries. They're just like scary thing, scary thing, scary thing. This is like high class, tiny morsel food, and they just give you a little bit at a time, and each bite is so
no, it's great.
Man, did you know that there was
the
original edit was 4? No, wait, an hour longer.
God.
3 hours long.
3 hours.
3 hours long.
No,
and it was no more horror. They kept all the horror stuff. It was just way more drama. So they had, for example, the dinner table scene.
Oh man. Great
that was
scene.
actually the first scene of a 3-scene sequence where that fight continued, and they Toni Collette's character Annie fought with her husband Steve in their bedroom for a bit, and then Steve went into Peter's room for a bit, and they just kept going. But then he realized, like, okay, this is boring and it needs pacing above all. Even if I like that performance and I like that scene, they ultimately just determined that it was like leaving the questions hanging at the end of the dinner table scene.
way better.
It was way better.
Yeah, but like,
I loved that scene.
Speaking of the dinner table scene, real quick, I don't know if any of you noticed this, but during the cuts going back and forth between Toni Collette's character and Alex Wolff's character,
That's Peter?
The food on Peter's plate kept changing.
Oh, is that continuity error?
it's hard. Low budget movies, like you can't. Really, like,
what was the budget?
$10 million.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And
That
it's
explains why the VFX. Look, I don't want to bring up another bad thing.
I
but
agree, but they do it smartly. Most of it's practical, but a few of the light flashes, especially the
Like
last
the blue
one,
light thing?
Yeah, on Peter when it like goes into his body, it's like
the blue lights didn't look well.
most of them are practical, but the ones that aren't are like
Some of
in
those
the
blue lights were practical.
Most of them are.
Cool.
But in like the hallway when it does the big like
That's why they looked good.
the ones that aren't are not.
The flies,
good looking.
man. The flies.
Yeah,
Flies and the ants. Oh, the ants were so
Although when they're on
bad.
his face, that looked good.
That's fine.
None of that really stood out to me as bad. The only thing that I thought looked hokey was when Annie is possessed and she goes floating by the background sideways. That just looked a little too floaty.
I laughed out loud at that point because
She's
I'm
like
like,
running.
come on.
I found that
What
mostly
is
scary.
this?
Like the one where Peter's in his room and she's in the darkness and you can't really see her. I love like the way they use darkness just the right amount in this movie. Like the same with the first supernatural moment is Annie's mom appearing in her studio. And in a shitty horror movie, you would have your ghost be like 0 to like 20% black.
Yeah.
And you'd have like maybe a couple highlights to make it like really pop and your eyes kind of drawn to it. But in this, they don't even go all the way to 0. Like the background's still darker and it's only goes to like 20%. And it's such a different effect, but it's so much more visceral because you're like, that is so unnatural that
looks
it's
really good.
not part of this room, but it's so there and like
For me, I find my eyes searching the scene like when you're looking in the dark and then your eyes don't immediately go to the thing. You're looking, and then you think you see the thing.
Yeah.
So good at that.
No, that was so good because you think like there's a moment where you're like, is that the grandma? I'm like, oh, it is the grandma.
Yeah.
Like,
And then there's a great edit there too. The lights come on.
Yep.
and
Yeah.
she's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The editing in these guys' movies is sick.
So
I thought that
There's
was-
an awesome crossfade in this movie where it's a crossfade is just like you're looking at one scene and then it kind of dissolves and fades to the next one. But he takes like 25 seconds to do it.
a really long
It's got
crossfade.
Peter. It's like Peter walking down the hall and then going into bed or something like that. It's right after he's come home from Charlie being killed. And the crossfade is there's so much overlap between the two images that you can see like a little Peter in the center of the screen and like a larger one around it or something.
yeah.
It's just really
Oh,
cool.
man.
And in Midsommar, there's some awesome edits too, when they cut to them being on the plane, like a door closes or something, and then suddenly it's like the airplane door. It's just like the editing's sick.
They do a lot of good stuff, like where she's in the car and then you just hear a door open and she's in the gym where they're having the support group. But I think my favorite edit is when they're putting Charlie into the ground and it's just the camera going into the ground and
Right,
it goes
right.
behind the dirt. And then because that's part of like the vertical space theme where there's more below and more above that we understand. But then the one like tiny shot that's just passing by the miniature of the houses that are sinking into the quicksand below the stairs. Did you guys notice that
Yeah.
miniature?
Oh, yeah.
That is the coolest miniature in this entire
really
movie.
cool, and I'm
it,
glad that they
fits in the
actually showed
theme.
it.
Yeah. I love that it just fits into the theme of like things are going down.
Things are
We're
going down,
all
but-
dying.
But I also like read it as like a hereditary thing where like this is all the houses that you're
Totally.
built on. Like
Yeah.
you're not isolated. you know?
Totally.
Fun little fact here. Jennifer Lame, who is one of the main editors of this movie, went on to work on Christopher Nolan's Tenet right
Oh
afterwards.
no.
Right after, she didn't do anything in between. Had a kid or
She
something.
also did Midsummer, but
I haven't seen Tenet, so
The editing in Tenet's not the problem.
Wait, the one thing I wanted to say about that the grandma ghost scene in the dark or whatever, I thought that was a great setup for the later scene where Peter. It happens a couple times in the movie where Peter wakes up in the middle of the night and he's looking around his room and he's like, is somebody there? And he's trying to see something, and then. At one point, it cuts to this chair in his
Yeah.
room that has a bunch of hoodies on it or whatever,
Yep.
and it kind of zooms in.
And it looks like Charlie.
Well,
No.
but there's nothing there.
No, but you think that's
But
my brain was like that.
The movie has
Yeah.
trained you to look for these things.
Totally.
So like I'm looking like at that shot, I was like looking close. I'm like,
Yeah.
is there something I'm missing?
Totally.
That is so amazing.
It's great,
'Cause
yeah.
the effect that you get in your chair is like you're so engaged.
Yeah.
And if like a jump happened there, you would just fly out of your chair. And then later on, when it is Charlie in his room, and then her head rolls off and it becomes a basketball.
Yeah,
Oh.
that was
Yeah.
great.
I
great,
love that
yeah.
this movie really withholds the jump scares. Like I'd say the only pure jump scare is when Toni Collette's been fully possessed and you see her, they're in the like foyer of the house and you see her in the corner and then Peter's attention's drawn to the naked smiling dude, which is really unsettling. And he goes back and she's gone. But then the camera angle changes and she runs out from the
Yeah.
darkness behind him. That's like the one pure jump scare, but it's so effective because everything else has been like, even like the surprising stuff still holds, still isn't like jumpy.
Or it's
And-
your fault. Like,
Yeah.
all it is just a cluck noise, and you're like, ah!
yeah.
Totally.
No, the clock.
And so yeah, it's great restraint because that's like the most basic tool of the horror filmmaker is the jump scare.
Like
and-
James said, if there was a jump scare in that chair hoodie scene, like it would work. But
Totally.
like the fact that they didn't is like amazing.
truly, I think the scariest scenes in here aren't even jump scares, like when
Yeah.
Toni Collette is hiding in Peter's bedroom, and you don't necessarily see it on the first watch because you're so focused on Peter, the main character at this point.
Yeah.
And then obviously second watch, you're looking more in the shadows and you see her there. And like James said before, it's like after you finished watching the movie, you're looking around your room. You don't want it to be dark because you're like, something is hiding in the shadows.
Yeah. I think that's my favorite moment in the entire movie is her
Yeah.
floating in his room because you, like you said, it's like you can barely see it, and it takes like a couple seconds before your eyes like, oh, and you just catch it. Oh,
You mean when she's like just pinned to the corner of the living room?
And it's his
No.
his bedroom.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the one in the living room you can see pretty clearly, like the contrast is high enough. But the one in his bedroom, it's much lower contrast, and she fades much more into the wall.
There's so much good imagery, man. Like, how about during her sleepwalking interaction with Peter, where suddenly it's like a shot, reverse shot. You're talking, I'm talking, it goes back and forth between them. And then suddenly it cuts back to her and she's just soaking wet. And then so is he, and they're just covered in lighter fluid again.
Oh, that was
What a
good.
great way to reveal that, oh, this is a dream.
Yep. Yeah, I love like they do like 2 nightmare sequences in this movie, and often nightmare sequences can be so cheesy and tacky, and it's such a cheap filmmaker trick to be like, here's a shocking thing, just kidding, it's not real.
Yeah.
But it feels so earned in this movie because you're so much with the characters on their journey that like it doesn't feel like it's like the filmmaker ripping their like the veil off your eyes. You're like, no, these characters are really experiencing this, and I'm experiencing it with them.
I also thought that was amazing because it's kind of like the inception of sleepwalking where she like initially is sleepwalking, but then she wakes up again.
Yeah.
And the great thing about that is not only that it's like, oh, we're doing it twice, gotcha, but we actually don't know whether she's really sleepwalking because by that time they have established that there's real paranormal shit going on.
Yeah.
So then we're like, wait, is she sleepwalking or she's not sleepwalking? She was like, this is part of the paranormal stuff.
And it builds into the side of like, we find out that she almost killed her and her son before, and it kind of adds to like, was she trying to do it? Was the sleepwalking a lie?
Yeah, we don't know.
Trust.
We don't know if she's a reliable narrator.
Totally.
We don't,
because
for the first half of the movie up into the midpoint, we are on the same level as the characters. We don't know anything more than they know.
Right.
It's only until the supernatural stuff is actually like explicit when she has the seance where we're like, okay, now we know as the audience, we're in a superior position where we know that there is paranormal stuff for sure. Some characters know, but Steve doesn't know. And then for the next half of the movie, it's Steve gaslighting her, being like, you're nuts.
Yeah.
But we know she's not.
I wanted to talk about that introduction because the point at which the movie makes it clear that paranormal shit's going on is, it struck me as goofy, particularly because when she's having the seance with Joan, and they have their hand on the glass or whatever, and she's like, move the glass or whatever. It moves just a little bit, and you're like, oh my gosh, what? Is this real stuff? And then it moves more, and then she's like, I got the chalkboard, and then the ghost starts writing on the chalkboard, or Payman does or whatever, and and he's like freaking out. She's like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this right now. And Joan says, Louis, we're going to stop for a second, but I'll be right back. Like, hold on a second.
What's your issue with this?
That just seemed so I laughed. You guys didn't think that was funny?
No, because it's like, to her, this is sweet and lovely that she gets to touch with her kid. But as the audience, you're more on Toni Collette's side. We're like, this is really fucked up.
I thought, man.
It didn't bother me at all.
You're telling me that wasn't meant to play for comedy?
No, I don't think so.
Oh my gosh, that's so
We actually see some paranormal activity right before that when Toni Collette is painting. And I don't know if you guys noticed this either, but the blue paint thing falls over, and she doesn't actually hit it with her hand.
That's right. And you can see...
It falls onto Joan's number, and that's the first time that she's like, okay, maybe I'll call Joan. Oh, okay,
so the demons are forcing her hand, and you can see the blue light in the background. It glints off some reflective glass.
That kind of stuff, though, is cool. I like that stuff because it's not so cheesy. It's not so in your face. It's like something mysterious happened. Oh, maybe it just knocked over. Maybe it didn't. But when a chalk is writing on a chalkboard, it's like, oh no.
All right, we need to stop.
It takes like an hour to turn off. We can't wait.
Oh no, you're right. It does take like 10 minutes. But why did that happen?
I don't know.
Ghosts.
Oh my God,
guys.
Pyman's forces.
Oh my God.
Pyman's here.
Okay, so going back to that.
Yeah, so the goofy floating chalk.
So Annie's paint falls on Joan's number, but before this, they get a spiritual ritual pamphlet in their door. Mm-hmm. And the cult had actually intended for Annie to go to that seance, but she didn't. And that's why Payman was like, okay, the next best way for me to get her to do the seance is
Joan.
Yeah. So he spills the paint on Joan's number, and she ends up going to the craft store where she meets Joan.
Right.
Here's another little tidbit, is that Joan actually had just purchased the chalkboard. It's in the back of her car.
Oh.
That's funny.
Wait, and that's when she tells her about seances,
about
right?
the seance. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's where she lures her to go to her house. She's like, please, Annie, come with me, please. Like, they conjured my grandson, and I got to talk to him. And then Annie
But she's
goes.
present at the first group therapy scene, right?
No, actually, I looked for her on the fourth watch, and Joni isn't at the first one.
She is. I saw her.
If she is,
I'm like, that's
there's no
Lydia
there's
from
no camera.
Handmaid's Tale.
There's no camera angle on. There's no shot right on her.
There is. Not
it's
right
a group,
on her.
Group wide.
On the group shot, she's on the left side. On the reverse shot,
that's so funny.
I noticed her.
I love that she was just buying the chalk, because she even has the lie where she's like, oh, like Lewis loved playing with this chalkboard.
Yeah, this is his connection to me, kind of a thing.
One note about that actor in my mind when I was going back for this second viewing, I was like, yeah, and remember the Joan, I think she's played by that lady from Titanic. So that, you know that lady in Titanic who is like the new money lady, like with the southern accent? Fuck, hold on.
Is she the same? Is it the same actress?
The same lady?
No, it's not.
Kathy Bates, isn't it? It's Kathy Bates, isn't it? No.
It sounds right.
I don't know.
She's definitely
love
Kathy
Kathy
Bates.
Bates.
Well, sort of. Have you guys seen A Handmaid's Tale? The Handmaid's Tale?
A little bit, yeah.
She's Aunt Lydia. She's like the evil handmaid boss.
Speaking of actresses,
Toni Collette.
no, the grandmother actually. Ari Aster never discloses the actress for the grandmother.
What?
Yeah, nobody knows who she
She's
is.
uncredited?
Uncredited. She's just a
Really?
random person in his life. He acknowledged her as the sweetest person he knows.
Just
but
so everyone,
that's it.
just so you're clear, she's
literally it.
not actually part of a cult.
Yeah, she does her job well. Like even like there's the photos of her like
Yeah.
getting showered with the gold coins. I'm like, I hate her and I hate everything so
Yeah,
much.
exactly.
She's got
She's
such
just
a
got
good
that
look.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Or, like,
picture of her smiling at
totally,
the funeral
yeah.
is
The
so
ghost
creepy.
version of herself, like
Yeah.
ooh.
She's definitely creepy.
She's got a
Yeah.
great headless body, you know.
How about that little girl, though?
Millie Shapiro.
Yeah.
She's actually a TikToker now.
Wow. Oh, so how much of her creepiness is innate and how much is like put on prosthetic makeup in this?
No, that's her actual face.
Yeah.
She's not altered at all?
Nope, not at all.
Hashtag
I
no
mean,
filter?
in real life, she wears like makeup and stuff.
Yeah,
like, she
a
looks
lot
like
of makeup.
Normal.
Yeah, they don't do her any favors in this movie with the lighting and
They
the hair
really, yeah.
and
The creepy
yeah, the
vibe
creepy
and the
vibe.
pigeon heads.
yeah, pigeon heads aren't a good look.
I would say that the first paranormal thing actually happens to her, and that's when she walks outside and she just sees her grandma like sitting in like a circle of fire.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true.
And her
That's
mom
true.
doesn't see that.
But that's like the first time where it's. I guess that's those. There's moments before, but they're deniably not, or like you could deny that they're supernatural.
Totally.
I guess we don't. Is it her grandma sitting there, or is it just a
don't know.
lady standing
It's the grandmother.
It's probably her.
there?
grandma.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Toni Collette, Annie doesn't. I think she doesn't go far enough
No.
physically that she would be able to see that.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Well,
yeah, it seems like
I think
that.
it's in her mind. Like I think,
Well, it's. Do you think Charlie's imagining it?
yeah,
Maybe.
it's like a vision.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you don't know about things like, for example, when
Exactly.
Charlie's in Peter's room, if Annie walked in, would she also see Charlie, or is it just for Peter? Who knows?
I prefer when they're visions. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I do have a question about the sleepwalking though. The scene that doesn't actually like feel like she's sleepwalking or this is actually happening is when Annie is trying to pull off Peter's head when he's in
Right,
bed.
like the arms-
I don't know if that actually like did
No, that's-
she
yeah.
actually try to pull his head off?
Who knows?
Who knows?
In
we
one
don't
of
know.
her dioramas though, before that scene we see him headless on the bed. So
That's
I wonder
true.
if that did actually happen. Cause then Peter's like, "You tried to pull my head off."
I like that scene
No, I
where like
love
you
it,
really
yeah.
don't know if she's sleepwalking still, if she actually came in and tried to save him. Like you just don't know.
No,
and I don't think the movie has
that's great.
The final answer for you.
I think in a different movie where we didn't have the combination of like mental illness and paranormal stuff that you would just be like, oh, this is just cheap.
Mental
Like
illness.
That's
the
the beauty
filmmakers
of
are
it.
just kind of like
It's
tricking us or whatever.
hereditary.
Yeah, but because we have both of these elements, we are asking, is this real? And it's.
I recall on my first viewing really questioning like how much of this is just mental health, but then on subsequent viewings, I just I guess I know that it's zero.
Right.
Real.
Right.
Yeah.
See, okay, maybe a note about multiple viewings. I don't like watching movies multiple times. Like if I really enjoyed a movie and I just kind of want to like go on that ride again, fair enough, I'll give it another watch. But I like one of your guys' points was that it gets better upon multiple viewings. But
I don't
to
think
me,
it does.
Huh?
I don't think this one does.
Well, you understand
I
more
see
about
more.
it. You
Yeah, you
understand
certainly
more
understand
about it.
more.
And to me, that is a weakness because my first go on this thing, I was confused.
You
but-
said you weren't confused.
What?
You said you understand everything.
No, by the end, I know exactly what's happening with the demon possession stuff. Sure, but like you're picking up on all this background stuff, and you're like, oh, they said this, and there was a chalkboard in the back or whatever, and so you understand more about the logistics of what happened and of how it all came together. But by the end of it, on my first watch, I totally understand what has happened. Not necessarily as it's happening, but. Anyways, I want to go on that ride, and I think that for me, the subjective experience was like a really great roller coaster ride that at the end kind of just like flattened out, and like it was
That's
not
so
interesting.
crazy because
Yeah,
the
it's
end is
opposite
so
for
wacky
me.
that some people didn't like the movie because they don't like the
See,
end.
but I think that this is maybe it's because I'm desensitized, and like I've seen so many movies and so much like crazy shit happen in movies that it's like, okay, they're doing the beautiful fucked up ending thing.
I don't
where it's
believe
just, like,
you've seen
descending.
so many movies that are more messed up than this.
Yeah, this is about as
like
fucked
have you
up
seen
as
like
I've seen.
have you seen like Serbian film and like
I
thi-
have, and
I
this is
think-
still disturbing.
I think maybe it's not like it's the nature of the thing that is fucked up. Like people being demon possessed is boring. Like, it's like,
seen
okay,
that a
I
million
fell out a
times.
window and now his spirit's in there, and like, oh my gosh, the cult thing happened.
Yeah, but like, when was
That's
the
just
last time you saw a floating mom staring down angry at her son as she pens her neck off, and the blood's spurting out and it's getting faster and faster?
It wasn't horrifying
What's
to me.
wrong with you?
Because it's like, I felt like I was in a haunted house at the P&E or something. I had,
No, not at all for me.
yeah, I'm like, oh, look at this scary thing over here. It's not dread. It's not existential horror.
But that's the end. That's
It's
like the
not
end
like-
of it. That's
Yeah,
like
it's
the
the
final
payoff.
payoff.
It's
not like
It's
my-
the payoff.
it's
You've
not
already
like-
gone through the horror of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's my whole thing. So you've gone through the horror, and now you get this like campy, cheesy slasher
Yeah,
part.
but like even the most cosmic horror still has to go there. Like, okay, we do
doesn't.
Alien, it gets there. It gets to become like a monster movie. Like, what's a cosmic horror where you're like, they never get there, where there's just a killer killing people?
Annihilation.
But that's not horror. That's just like
Cthulhu stuff.
It's this cosmic horror.
But Cthulhu even is like that when you
not-
do it in a movie, you still can't get the same effect as the book, because the book can be like vague language, but you need a visual of like what's going on.
But you don't need these like cheesy things where someone's is like, oh, I'm looking over here and suddenly there's a person floating in the air sawing their own head off. How horrifying.
I want to
It's
see
not
that.
I want to
random,
see that.
though.
Yeah, that
I
works
love
for
that.
this.
It's pretty random.
Well, no, because like
she's
chopping your head off
How'd
is
she get up
clearly a
there?
theme for the movie.
How'd
She
she get up there?
floated.
She floated.
Where?
They've established. What are you talking about?
Oh, the window. What? There's an open window?
Payman needs 3 heads also, so there's a reason
Yeah.
why she's cutting her head off.
Also, why is she flying around and then suddenly she has to chase after him on the ground?
Because she's trying to horrify the kids.
Why does she just fly and grab him
Well,
right away?
she's very floaty. She doesn't go that fast.
Yeah,
can't
she's fast
control
on the
it.
ground.
It's just this is what I'm saying. It just brings up so many questions where it's like, okay, if you're buying in and you're like, I'm on this ride and I wanna be titillated with heads being cut off by piano wire. Like, great, cool, be titillated. But to me, it's like, it was just cheesy. It was just campy. It's like, oh no, a machete came out of nowhere. Oh, how gory! Look at all the blood. Oh, horrible.
To me, it doesn't come off that way, because I think it's even the way she's doing it kind of goes into the theme of it, where she's like, it's all for you, Damien scene. She's like looking at her son and she's like, this is for you, and they don't have to say it because we've seen that like before, but it works into the theme of this family dynamic of it. And so it's not just like Jason being like, ha, ha. It's still tied into the theme. It's emotional payoff for it all. It's disturbing as fuck. And so it's like, that's all I expect out of a horror movie, and it delivers. I don't know
But
what
then
you're
there's
expecting.
there's
okay,
genre
wait.
aspects as well, right? Like, for example, when Peter runs into the attic and he closes the door on Annie, and you just hear this banging on the door. Like,
I don't like
she's
that.
She's banging and banging to try to get in, and then we see the source of the
that's
banging
cheesy.
is Annie. Like sitting on
That was
she's
cheesy,
crying.
right?
That's
no,
cheesy.
it was amazing.
No,
She's-
that's cheesy.
David's
I
agreeing with
agree
me.
that
Let
way.
me describe to the audience what the
Wait,
fuck I'm
I want
talking about.
James's
Stop.
side. I want James'
Stop. I haven't even told them what I'm talking about. Annie's like crawling on the ceiling and banging on the ceiling with her head like in a eerily like unhuman speed. I thought that was awesome, and that's great imagery, and it's just purely horror imagery, and it actually
Straight out of The
doesn't need
Exorcist.
it doesn't need to have unity with the family drama. Even if it does, that's bonus, but it's just part of the genre. I want to see fucked up imagery.
I agree. I think
it's
the
fucked up
idea.
imagery we've seen before.
No, here's the thing. Hereditary doesn't follow those cheesy horror tropes like you would see in Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. You do see some inspiration from Exorcist, like you mentioned, because that scene is very much like that. But she's possessed. Like you're seeing. Okay, here's the thing: is I think it feels cheesy and wrong because it's Uncanny Valley. Like you're trying to understand it, but it just doesn't make sense to you, and it's up to like the subjectiveness of how you want to interpret it, how you want to see
I think
it.
that one shot in particular doesn't do it for me, because you can see that the camera's sped up, and it's like the sound doesn't match how her head is moving, and so for like just a pure like
From the technical side?
I can't connect with that shot. That being said, when he's in there and like the naked people are just in the background,
creepy.
and there's the headless corpse, and like, or is the headless corpse even in that scene? I don't know. But then there's his floating mom, and like all of that stuff works because like it doesn't feel fake to me. Like it's part of this reality that the movie has created.
All right. Look. We've addressed this already, but I will say that probably a large reason why I'm unsatisfied by the ending to this movie is because it plays into these horror tropes. And you guys are saying like, hey, it's a horror movie, people are going to be climbing on walls, people are going to be floating around, and there's going to be crazy rituals and stuff. It's like, all right, that's part of the horror genre, and that's fine. And I don't watch a ton of horror. I've seen some horror movies, so I'm familiar with the tropes, but I don't seek them out because I love them or whatever. So it's like, that's definitely a preference thing. However, I will say that it was also largely disappointing to me because we got so much promise in the early run, and the fact that he wrote this as a family drama and then adapted it into a horror, I think it really shows, because I wanted the family drama. I wanted the conclusion to that story. I wanted some confrontation of the issues at hand, and instead we get kind of the confrontation gets cut off, and then we get people climbing on walls and cutting heads off and blah blah.
I suppose that's true.
So it's like, yeah, fair enough. Those are horror tropes, and you want to see that. Like the people who go, like that would have been disappointing for all the people who got sucked in from the trailer, because the trailer is like,
horror.
This is a horror movie.
Yeah.
And so if everyone went to the theater and they saw this movie and they're like, wait, there was no heads cut off and no people climbing on walls. What the hell? Like, yeah, okay, you have to please those people. So I understand why they did that. I'm just saying that the immense promise of that family drama was just lost for me.
You need to see that 3-hour cut.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
And I to me, I feel they're not the same. I feel like they do manage to close the family arc in a way that I'm like, I get it. I get that.
Let's talk
and
about
then
that.
to me, just the horror stuff makes it that like, instead of it being like family stakes or like even life and death, there's something like the stakes become so large that all the family stuff becomes way more twisted and insane because the stakes are so much higher.
So the protagonist, Annie, right? So what would we say is her arc?
This is actually, well, I know what her arc is, I think, but the reason this is a 9 and not a 10 for me is because the movie isn't very clear in what is the dramatic question of the movie. Right. The dramatic, like the outward journey of a movie should be a clear visual thing. It should not be, I want to be in a certain state. I don't want to have it's not about like a relationship. It should be actually like a visual thing. Like, when it's over. Like if it's Ocean's 11 or something, it's when you're walking out with a bag of money. That is over. And yes, there are internal journeys as well, but that's different. So in this movie, it's never really clearly stated, is the dramatic question of the movie, will Annie heal? Will their family move on? Like that's never really clear to me. And at the beginning of the movie, it's really unclear who the protagonist is. You almost might think it's Steve, because he gets
Steve.
At the beginning, yes, he actually gets the most screen time. He's the only one who
dad.
Yeah, he's the only character that talks to all the other characters. He's in the opening shot. He's the one on the phone during the inciting action when they say that your grandmother's been exhumed and dug up. He's the one who takes that call. So you're like, is he the main character?
I didn't feel that way. To me, I would say that it's more split between Peter and Annie.
Yeah, could definitely be Peter, especially at the end.
Yeah, and I would say that in some ways he kind of is. He's definitely the audience proxy. I wouldn't say he's the protagonist,
right?
But he's the eyes of the audience into the movie, and that's why
is he or is Steve?
No,
Steve's the everyman.
Peter, because he's dead, and then. Like, think about how scary Peter sees the horror stuff, and then how peaceful he sees it once he's possessed. Yeah. He's the eyes, I think, of the audience, and like,
totally.
But Toni Collette, Annie is she's the main character.
She is the main character. She does drive the story forward, and she has the most screen time. And it's clear by the time that she goes to therapy for sure. Like her eulogy is the first monologue in the movie and gives the most like exposition. And then by the time she has her second speech, which is at therapy, it's like solidified that she's the main character. But I'm just saying it's kind of unclear, and it's kind of unclear what her arc is or where the movie's going in that way. So that's where I would take my 1 point off.
What did you guys think of those performances? Do you think that across the board they're good? Do you think there's any that are weak?
Okay, wait. Let's talk about
Tony
that.
or
from everybody.
Wait, I want to talk more about Annie's arc.
Tell me about Annie's arc.
Because we got to address this.
Yes,
like
you
guys are saying
that
right. You guys are saying that the characters have reach some sort of confrontation or fulfillment, and sure they do reach a confrontation. There's conflict. There's physical conflict, but where is the mental emotional confrontation and reckoning? I would say that the themes that Annie is trying to like the themes that are relevant to Annie in this are the things that she's struggling with are the heredity of like trauma and like psychoses.
Yeah.
She struggles with motherhood. She says to Peter, "I never wanted to be a mother," but she is a mother. She passed off Charlie to her mom because she didn't know what to do, and that was just like, she's screwed up in that way. There's a dysfunction in the family due to their lack of communication with each other. They compartmentalize their trauma. Like, these are things that I would have liked to see addressed, but really they just kind of all stay the same. By the end of it, you're like, sure, maybe Annie gets to a point where she's like, I'm trying to protect the family, but there's never a point that's not part of the arc. Like, it's not that she hasn't.
I think it is actually when she says she's trying to get this across in therapy, where she's like, I'm not to blame, but I am blamed.
Yeah.
And then at the end, when she finally is like takes responsibility for it and is like, I'm going to sacrifice myself, I think that could be seen as the setup for that payoff.
I guess so, but like, is that her accepting the blame for what she doesn't know what she's blamed for? So then she's like, I'm gonna kill myself. Like, that's not progression. That's not confrontation. That's just despair. That's nothing. Nothing happens.
I think that like
nothing happens and then they die.
I think what you don't like is the thematic payoff to the questions. That you're saying that like
there is no thematic payoff.
No, because
there's only questions.
Toni Collette is the only one active, and she's actually seeking help. She's trying to do these things,
right?
And the payoff for that is death anyway. And so you don't like that
because it's a tragedy.
It's a tragedy, and like that's totally fair. You want her to succeed because she tried. But this movie's like, it doesn't matter how hard you try it, you're going to die.
I think even in a tragedy, though, you want to see some sort of progression downwards. You don't want to see, okay, I have this problem and I'm kind of trying to fix it, but then I just fail and we all die.
No, but there is absolutely a downward trajectory. She's avoiding her work. She's avoiding her family. She's avoiding therapy. It's a constant downward.
Well, it's not constant. She oscillates. It usually should be an oscillation, and it oscillates insofar as her actually, she does go to therapy. She does do the seance, and she does try to get her family involved in it. But the demons are too fucked. She realizes that she's not actually summoning her daughter.
Right.
Her daughter is now, when she does summon Charlie, Charlie's separated from Pyman, so Charlie's just confused.
Yeah.
She's like, hello?
Yeah.
Where am I, Mom?
Go ahead.
Just a lot of like the bad things that happen too. I mean, as a mother character, you want them to be like the one fixing the family or helping the family, and obviously that's what Annie is trying to do. She's just trying to make things better, but like a lot of the bad things that happen are because of things that Annie's done, like the seance, like she forces Charlie to go to the party with Peter.
This is exactly where I wanted to go next.
That's a good
keep
point.
going.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally want to touch on that. Yeah, just those kind of things happen because Annie is like trying to help the family, but obviously Payman is like, no, I'm gonna turn this whole thing around on you.
Yeah, my question is, to what extent is Annie aware of her role and the involvement? So Annie, she seems to have some kind of subconscious awareness of her children's like grim birthrights, right? Because she says, I'm not to blame, but I am blamed. She never wanted Peter. She says that. She almost burned down the house with her kids in it. It's just like, she's kind of like against having these kids, right?
Yeah.
But it's not conscious. And yet the other side of that is she does send Charlie along with Peter to the party.
Yes.
And ultimately, she is like subservient in devotion to Pyman at the end. You see her body like bowing down in the treehouse. Like, why? And then also she keeps sleeping in the treehouse. Right? Like, so she is an agent of Pyman, but she also subconsciously rejects it as well. She knows that she's carrying these bad seeds.
I would say that's one of the thematic questions the movie poses is like, how present are you in your life? How present are these characters in these moment to moments? And the movie says most of them are not present, and that's the problem. None of them are actually aware of what's going on, and she doesn't really know. She wants things to be better, but she's not willing to put in the actual work to be present in her life.
I will say that, after like you guys, after I watched this movie, I did a bunch of Googling. I searched it up because despite my misgivings about how it ended, there is a lot of depth as we've established. There is a lot of depth in this movie, and you can read into a lot of this stuff. And I agree with you that is the thematic conclusion. I think that we are all subject to forces beyond our control, and despite our neuroses or despite our attempts to get around that, our neuroses and our hereditary, baggage and trauma and our own choices in not communicating with our family or whatever, like that keeps us down. And I think that's a good theme. I think that I didn't feel it at the end though. What I wanted was some sort of maybe underscore, like at the very least an underscoring of that, where like somebody. Well, I guess that's there. I mean, I don't want to be harder on the movie than I want to be because I do think that there's a lot of good stuff there, and that the 6.75, maybe it's a 7, okay? But like all of that is all the great stuff, and I would have liked to see some sort of conclusion other than life is fucked, and then at the end we say life is fucked.
These people needed Jesus though.
Well,
okay.
Riley is speaking to something where it's like you can have a tragedy, but you can have a bad ending, but not a defeated ending.
Yes.
So when the tragedy happens to the characters, okay, but the upshot has to be, but life goes on, or there's a second chance, or there's some kind of thing that we can grab onto as the audience. When you walk out, when it's just like completely.
Oh, you know what? I just had a realization. Thank you, James.
You're welcome.
Because you said that. Defeated. That's the key word. If in a tragedy, what I think. Like, it can be sad, it can be a bad ending and something that is horrible for everybody, but as long as the player, this isn't a video game, as long as the protagonist has agency and they brought themselves to that point, I think it can still be fulfilling.
It's a lesson for us to be like, don't do what they did.
As a dark
but
journey.
in this, what are you going to say? You know, they tried, they failed.
And then she didn't even fail. She tried and Payman killed them all.
She didn't try very hard.
But to me,
like,
actually,
if you're actually trying to
exactly.
take care of your mental health, like going to group therapy one time, then dodging, like even think about that. Like she meets Joan because she dodges therapy. She avoids the work to be present, and that's what leads her on that path to meet Joan.
And Peter is the one who buries it and doesn't. He buries his emotions the most, and he gets the worst fate. He gets inhabited. But
Steve has the best one. Burn alive in like a second.
Can I just say Steve is super lame?
He's a therapist.
Is he?
Yes. Okay. The only time you find out anything about him, because I'm like, he's so chill. His daughter just died.
Yeah.
Like the grandmother was living in the house with them, who's just like psychotic, and he had to enforce this like no contact rule. And it's like, how does he have the guts to do that?
Yeah.
If as someone who hasn't cried for a healthy reason for many years,
Yeah.
I identify so much with Steve.
Literally.
Where he's holding it together because that's all he can do. He's not really trying to make things better. He's trying to smooth over conflict and have things be normal. And that's a very common thing.
Yo,
like that's
totally.
why I go to therapy, is to like not accept normal,
Right.
to actually work through things.
Yeah.
Right.
But you see him struggle too. You see him taking his pills. You see him break down at the light after he tries to go through a red light. But what I wanted to mention is he's sending an email to his colleague about how he thinks Annie is going crazy. And if you look at his email address, it's the exact same as the therapist he's emailing. So that's how you know he's a therapist. I watched it 4 times, so I finally clued into that.
I
It's
love
like,
that.
this guy is so chill. What is wrong with him?
I love that scene when he breaks down in the car, because like that's how grief works for a lot of people. It's never like when you're supposed to cry. It's just like you say something and he like has a breakthrough, and it's just like that's when he has to cry. He has to cry right there. Stop at the red light.
you know what's weird though is the fact that like he's got a British accent. And
No, he doesn't. He just has a terrible American accent.
he goes between.
He's just a
like,
bad.
He's doing a bad American accent.
what I'm saying is like their son is brown with curly hair. Nobody looks or sounds like anyone else in the family,
Yeah.
but it just doesn't matter. I
Well,
guess.
I wonder.
Do-
So
can
at the dinner scene,
Look for a meaning here.
she says like nobody wants to take responsibility for anything they do. And she looks at the husband when he does that, and I was like, oh, maybe there's like a second plot or something about her cheating on him or him cheating on her or something where like there's more to it. And then I'm like, well, maybe he's not his son.
I didn't think about that, but I was wondering if Peter was adopted, but it sounds like no.
I don't think so.
So I think it's just casting. And
I think they just didn't think too hard about like wanting to.
They
make
just wanted
them
the
look
best people
look
for the
same.
roles.
and they're all great.
They're so good.
Can we go back to Toni Collette's character Annie for a second?
Yeah.
Sure.
And what James was saying about like everything that she does is kind of in homage to Payman. Like even though she's not subconsciously like having any knowledge about who Payman is or what he is. She just like so happens to have everything lined up perfectly. Even like the birth of her son, for example, Peter, she didn't know that he was going to be this vessel for a demon, but she was still responsible for giving birth to him. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to, essentially, because it's hereditary. She is only there so that she can like, what's the word? She's only there so that she can provide something for Payman, for the grandmother's
and they're all getting
religion.
hexed, right? There's all these like little hex words written on their walls.
Yeah.
And this is actually a thing that's like, they never explain it, but you just know.
Well,
You're just like, oh, those look weird words I didn't understand. It must be because of this.
They don't 100% explain it, but there is that part where Joan is yelling at Peter from across the street, and she yells a few of the words that are on the wall. So then I was kind of like, oh, so they're like spells or whatever.
And you can see actually there's a part where Peter like looks out his window, like he's creeped out, and then the shot we get of the house is kind of over the shoulder of some shadowy figure, and we see breath. So you know there's a human element at play here. There's people intervening.
Yeah, you kind of, and I love how they don't.
There's more to that.
They don't like show the stalker, but I wrote down, I'm like, oh, Joan's probably the stalker, because like there are a couple of times where you see somebody put the thing in the mail slot, and you see that breath shot.
But you know it's more than just Joan, because when Charlie's at school, there's just like a random lady waving at her from across the street.
Yeah,
You're
totally.
like, who are these people? Who's this smiling motherfucker at the funeral?
So
Yeah,
creepy.
you guys, right at the very beginning of this movie, when they're coming home from the funeral, if you have your audio loud enough, you can hear footsteps in the house before they enter.
Oh, creepy. I actually have goosebumps right now. That's so
that's
creepy.
how
Oh my
you know that
gosh.
there's people there. And then the other scene that was so frightening was when you have the scene of the house before just shit gets turned upside down, and then it goes from light to dark, and there's just all of the people standing. I took a picture of it because I don't know if you guys would have
Where is
seen
this?
it. Right at the very end of the movie, almost. Right when they start doing all of the stuff in the house, and he gets possessed and the husband burns. Here, this. Do you see all the naked people?
Oh my god!
Did you
so
see
this
that?
is an exterior shot of the house, like really wide. You can
Yeah.
see the forest surrounding the
Didn't
house.
notice that.
But there's just these.
Can you
all
send me
these
that
little
photo so I can put
bodies.
it in the video?
It's so freaking creepy.
I didn't notice that at all.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's why fourth watch, I was like, I've never seen this before.
Wow, they're all
So guys,
congregating
watch
there.
the movie 4 times, and then it'll be good.
And then congregate in the treehouse.
It's only for a split second. So like it's that weird unawareness that the family has inside of the house, but like after kind of viewing it from the cult's perspective, you see
Oh,
them.
is it because like they do that transition where like they'll show the outside of the day for like a couple frames and then cut it to night?
That's exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I love
Oh,
that.
and you're so discombobulated.
Yeah, you're like,
Exactly.
oh, it's night. Okay.
Exactly.
Editing.
So where does this stand for you guys on like the echelon of horror? Like we give it 9. What did you give it, Sarah?
I give it a 9 as well.
Yeah, so 9s is pretty high. I think in the last 30 years, the only other horror movie that's a 9 for me is like Get Out.
Get out. It's
I
very
didn't
I
good.
was
like
going to
that
ask
movie.
this. So you guys think Get Out is a horror?
For sure.
Well, that's one of those borderline. Like some people think thriller isn't a real genre. It's like an overflow genre, but
Thriller is sort of like, in my mind, that's what you just call a scary movie that's not quite like fully horrifying.
it's like the gore level.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I gauge my horror.
But I think like the names
Wait,
are
wait,
not
wait.
meaningful. It's like it's clearly part of that movement.
Sarah
Are you
just
pointing at me?
Sarah just said she doesn't like Get Out.
No, Sarah just said you
You don't
that
like Get Out?
The gore is what makes horror?
No, okay. I've said that. I think I said this in the very first podcast episode of when we did Alien. The way that I gauge my horror movies and thrillers and slashers is thriller is very much based around the plot and making you feel stuff. They don't want that like shock value of like the gore and the blood. That's when we go into horror, where there's like almost equal amounts of plot development and blood and gore. Just like this movie, for example, where you see in a thriller, you wouldn't necessarily see Charlie's head on the side of the road
Fuck
up
no.
close.
In most horror movies, even like
But I mean, they shot like her head exploding and stuff. Like they shot every version
Yeah,
of it.
100%.
Like there's a
Oh.
version of this movie where like you would see her head like come off and like they explode
Oh, yeah.
and like the body fall and like
Okay, so I think this is solidifying for me that the thing that I don't like is these horror conventions, I think. Because like, I don't know, guys.
We called it at the beginning.
Yeah, it's
What?
it's a preference thing.
He just said he called at the beginning that you don't like horror,
Yeah.
and now you're coming around to it.
Well, I don't like saying I don't like horror because like I'm open to watch any movie. It's not like if once I find out that it's a horror movie, I'm just be like, ew, no, I don't want to see blood. Like it's not that. It's that when it is used cheaply, it bothers me. Like I have no problem with gore in movies, you know? Like explode all the heads you want if the movie is a fulfilling journey that makes me feel something. Right?
Yeah.
And I think the problem with this is that it didn't make me feel.
Here's something for you, Riley. I learned many years ago as a new Tool fan that in the 90s, Tool's videos were a lot of them were stop motion.
Right.
And they're just really creepy little stop motion figures like just doing random things. Like there's like pipes with meat coursing through them. It's just so weird. And I remember like Googling an early Google, like, what does this video mean?
Yeah.
And then interviews saying, well, it doesn't mean anything. There's no plot. There's no statement in this video. It's actually just a bunch of evocative imagery to make you feel unsettled. And so for me, when there's something like in Midsommar or in this movie where there's just a gratuitous shot, like I don't need to see her festering head on the ground in the
Right.
daylight for like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
That's not serving a plot purpose. It's actually just making me sit on my couch like, ugh.
Okay.
I don't need that to mean anything. I can just feel the feeling.
100%. And I get that, the purpose is to make people feel unsettled. But I think that you have to have a reason for unsettling people. Otherwise, why are you doing it? Otherwise, it's just aesthetics. Otherwise, it's just window dressing.
No, but
otherwise,
there is a purpose.
Otherwise,
there is a purpose.
Wait. Otherwise, it's just a stupid action movie with a lot of explosions.
Yeah.
You're being titillated.
Yep.
I don't want to be titillated. I want to be engaged. I want to be taken on a journey.
Here's the reason why that head is there. The whole idea of the movie, the central kind of idea that keeps getting asked is like, deal with your shit. That is what happens when you don't deal with your shit. The head gets eaten by ants. It's like a visual for not dealing with your stuff.
Oh, no one even collected the head.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And we've already talked about this where like, okay, yeah, you could argue that the lesson of the movie is that the people didn't deal with their shit and so this happened. Mm-hmm. And fair enough, but my point is that I didn't feel like that point was hammered home.
That's fair.
It was just that a bunch of stuff happened and then more bad stuff happened.
Fair.
So anyways, we've already covered that.
I really
are
want
subjective.
a T-shirt with the seal of Pyman on it. It's a beautiful.
I do
it's
not.
really cool.
Man,
Yeah, you wouldn't wear that shit? You think it's creepy?
My favorite thing about my research and like to the occult about this movie is how many people are mad at this movie because they made an audience an unwitting member of the ritual to summon payment, and they really believe that this movie has power to summon payment and that we've brought payment into
Well,
power
That's
in
the
this
beauty
world.
of
I feel
A24.
sorry.
Yeah.
Did you know A24 literally tried to get the cult of Satan or the Church of Satan to endorse the witch?
Oh my
Like legitimately, A24.
That's
you guys are
hilarious.
awesome.
The Church of Satan is awesome. Those guys are cool. You should
a
watch
documentary.
it. I'm not even trying to be like about it. There's a Netflix documentary about it, and they're just like a cool like political activist group. I think
because
it's awesome.
obviously they don't actually believe in Satan and
They're
all
the
that stuff.
outsiders.
I think it's hilarious.
It's a bit of a meme.
I would totally put a little statue of Baphomet in my house. Like I think it's.
Totally,
I have this little
man.
display case in this house that I'm renting
Nice.
now,
Yeah.
and we don't know what to put in there. Right? There's just a picture of my wife with Pauly Shore when he was at a bar that she was
Oh
at in
my
Surrey.
God.
But I'm thinking about putting maybe some red lights in there and some.
Sure.
Going back to the movie real quick. Real quick, the point of the podcast. Anyways, the party. In what world would an 18... Well, I don't know how old Peter actually
Oh my
is,
gosh.
but in what world
He's doing
would he
SAT
be like,
prep, so he's in grade 12.
Okay, yeah. Why would he agree to take Charlie to this party? Like,
Okay.
as soon as the mom asked him, he's like, well, she doesn't want to go. And then the mom's like, did you ask her? And he's like, no. But he's never like, no, I don't want to take Charlie to this party. And that's exactly what I would
This is
expect from
interesting.
him.
Lauren said the same thing when we were watching it. She
Right?
was like, what the heck? That would never happen. He would fight back. And I'm like, you underestimate the libido and of teenage boys. He just wants to, man, he's not thinking about all that. Like, he doesn't care. He just needs to get this party and see this chick.
But he also sold it as a school thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
he
told
did.
her it was like a school
But-
barbecue.
He backed himself into a corner with that.
But he said that, and then when the mom goes down to ask Charlie, she says, "Do you want to go to this party with your brother?" So like, I don't know. It's weird.
No,
Charlie
but
says no.
That all tracks to me because she doesn't want to go because she's so like such a loner. But the mom at this point has like now doubled down on making Peter take her.
Yeah.
And she's like just recovered her from being like weird and not normal. She's like, she has to do something normal right now or else I'm going to be crazy. And so that all tracks to me.
No, yeah, she's struggling. Like Annie is struggling with motherhood. Like that is a way to illustrate that she is not a good mother, and she, because she hasn't had a good example. She's screwed up or whatever. But like that's her making a bad decision. And to me, like Peter's just lying and saying whatever he will say in order to get to this party.
They
Like,
also don't talk much. They don't talk much, right?
Yeah.
So he's not going to push back because he doesn't want to have a conflict. But also,
Exactly.
I believe that's the first conversation they have in the whole movie. They're in the funeral room together, but other than that, you do not see Annie interact with Peter until like 25 minutes in.
Huh.
It's like the last interaction. It actually just goes to show how like they're so disconnected from each other.
Yeah. They really don't establish like the relationships between those characters, and that's because they don't have much of a relationship.
Ari Aster made Alex Wolff take Millie Shapiro out for lunch almost every day when they were in Utah so that their characters could get used to each other.
Yeah.
Which is so cool.
What do you mean?
Like he was just like, here, you need to take her, like you need to experience what it's like to have a little sister in order to like get into your character properly.
Oh, so that he can be irritated by having a little sister.
Yeah, and then also during the car scene when he is sitting there after she dies, he feels more of an emotional connection.
We didn't even talk about
fucked.
that. We didn't even talk about that.
So
that was masterful in my opinion.
yeah. I love that they show restraint. Like you see her about to approach it. You hear the smack, the drop, and then just his reaction for two different scenes. It's him. The first thing I love is that he kind of inherits her struggle to breathe.
Right.
And I don't know if it's like a spiritual thing or it's
That's
just like
afterwards.
No, immediately. Immediately he was like breathing fine and he starts wheezing. He's like,
What? In the car?
in the car. Yeah, he's wheezing.
I didn't notice that.
And then it comes back later. And so I love that. I love his reaction. And then I love the next scene when he's just in bed because he went home, didn't tell anyone, just the body in the back, doesn't know what to do. And he just lies there and it's just a close up on his face, like 1,000-yard stare. And you just hear the mom discover it. That is like the most amount of restraint because like most filmmakers would want to like dig out the drama of that moment to be like show the mom like crying, all this stuff. But man,
It's almost just too far though.
Really?
Well, no, it would be.
Yeah.
This is enough because the
yeah.
concept psychologically is so disturbing. It's enough for you to imagine it yourself to be like, oh my God, can you imagine doing that? Like you discover this headless body of a little girl. Oh, it's just so repulsive that you don't need to see it. And almost might be off-putting to see it.
Well, and like what I like too is like I can also identify with Peter where like you're stoned and you do something really bad and you're like, I can't deal with this right now. Like I can't. And like you just have to avoid it. But like obviously I've never killed my sister, but like like I don't know, like I identified with both sides so much.
And you can see his eyes being open in the morning. I think that's another one of those like cuts where hours pass and his eyes are still open. You can see that he hates himself for it too.
Totally. I really respect Ari Aster.
Already asked her what?
I already asked her.
Yeah.
I really respect him for that whole sequence from like Peter bringing Charlie to the car and that, the accident and afterwards him going to the, like, that is just, to me, objectively the best. Well, okay, not objectively, but to me, that was absolutely the best part of the movie. And, you just feel that horror.
There's one
so good.
thing I hated about that.
What?
It just makes me cringe. So the part where Annie is just bracing herself on the ground, it feels so real and so emotional. Like I don't know, I've never lost anybody, but I can imagine that's what it would be like.
And
to, like,
she's just
lose your
wailing.
daughter. Yeah.
I want to die.
Why did they have lightning and thunder? That's like, did you guys notice that?
Wait,
oh my
when?
gosh. In the background, while she's like bracing herself on the ground, they
Oh.
just had lightning and thunder in the
notice that at
background. I'm
all.
like, why did you add that? The scene is already so emotional.
Also, she discovers the body in the morning.
Yeah, and then it's like,
So when is she having this breakdown?
Maybe
For the next
day.
25 hours.
Yeah, for the next rest of her life.
Yeah.
I found I was more distracted because I just watched the first part of Midsommar, and I was like, oh, this is so similar to Florence Pugh like wailing when her boyfriend after her friend died, and I was
Right.
like, oh, he likes this scene, doesn't he? He likes the style of scene.
Yeah, that is similar in
And head
Midsommar.
trauma.
Spoiler for Midsommar. Yeah, it's her
Ariana.
her sister.
Yeah.
Like murder suicides her own parents. And it's
I
like
don't know. It was his
times.
sister. I never.
Yeah.
I've missed that.
in both cases, it's basically the upshot is incalculable suffering
Yeah.
being expressed like just through wailing. And in both those movies, you're just like, oh, this is just like more than I can handle right now.
Are we to understand that they didn't talk about the accident really afterwards?
Actually, Annie brings it up with Joan when she's sitting there. She's talking about how she found.
She says at first it's a smell.
Yeah, she found Charlie's body, and
Yeah.
she was saying how the body was just covered in this like black tar that was blood.
Yeah.
Oh, later on, there's a shot that I didn't understand. I was going to ask you about.
Yeah.
I think it's when she's having tea at Joanne's. But
Yeah.
there's like a little black speck she
Yes.
pulls out her mouth. Is that meant to be the
Yep.
tar from her body?
No.
Or what is that?
So essentially, throughout the movie, there's also this herb that is probably associated with payment. I'm not 100% sure, but there's a few times we see it. Right at the beginning, when they're at the funeral, there's a lady putting oil on the grandmother's lips. That's probably the same herb, as well as there's a picture of the grandmother feeding Charlie, and there's the black herbs at the bottom of the bottle. And then you see it as well when Annie's drinking that tea. She pulls it out of her
Oh, that's
mouth.
you know
awesome.
what
It could be
this
like a control herb.
You know
or
what this
something.
is? This is so funny. Like, okay, so now I'm like looking at horror from the lens of like a Star Wars fan or something, where it's like where I watch a Star Wars movie and I'm paying attention to all this stuff. I'm like, oh, that's a DL-44 blaster. Like I know all that, like E11 standard issue
Yeah.
stormtrooper rifle. Like I pick up on this stuff, so
Yeah.
now I'm like, oh, this is what horror
That's
fans
so
love.
funny.
Yeah,
And
you
I
have to
watch
understand.
that.
It's just like,
and just
oh,
like
that's
put
like
the
a-
pieces together, even if it means absolutely nothing for
Yeah.
the story, but
Yeah.
doesn't make the movie
Yeah, man.
necessarily better.
You have to
It's
understand
cool
the
that it's
world.
there.
You have to
Right.
understand the universe because,
Exactly.
like, for
Right.
example, Sarah and I have been watching Wicker Man, both versions, and thinking like, oh, whoa, Ari Aster took a lot from these movies, especially like Midsommar.
Oh, yeah.
It's like
Right.
they're like pagan kind of horror movies.
Yeah,
its own.
yeah.
I've been informed it's its own subcategory of horror. Is all these like pagan movies.
Right.
So when you know that kind of stuff, then you know when they're talking about Paimon and how Paimon will bring you wealth and good familiars. I was like, what the hell is good familiars?
Like slaves, isn't it?
No, I Googled it. I thought it was just
like
like
pets or
relations. But yeah, it's animals.
Yeah.
It's like pets. So in witchcraft lore, it would be like familiars are these animals that kind of serve you, and they're not real. They're like apparitions. They look real.
Yeah.
But they're like your weird, creepy servants. Like I have Newt.
Yeah.
Like it's just
The Salem the cat in Sabrina is
Yeah,
a familiar.
exactly.
there you go.
That's interesting.
I know everything about this
Because for
stuff.
vampires, a familiar is their servant human.
Oh, creepy. Okay.
So humans are like pets, because yeah.
So how would you guys compare this to Midsommar? Which one do you think is better?
I want to know which one Riley likes
Yeah,
better.
me too.
Okay, so this is actually an interesting question because I saw Midsommar and I think I kind of got a similar feel where it's like it's a lot of great setup, interesting characters, but then it just for me again it devolves into shock horror silly stuff. I think that there's a bit more characterization in Midsommar. I think I would say I like Midsommar more because there is a very clear journey there, and there is almost a success story in Dani is her name?
Yeah.
In her separating herself from this. Well, he's not really an abusive boyfriend, but he's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And kind of like freeing herself from that and like ascending to be the summer
Totally.
queen or whatever.
Get, her
May
feelings
queen.
are validated, and it's kind of one of those. There's a category of movie of story archetype, like you know how there's like heist movies. There's this kind of movie. That movie is called like institutionalized. So she goes from being an individual to joining the group.
Right.
Yeah.
There's that, and so there's a clear journey there. I think I like that a bit more, but again, I think all of the little like shock moments
Where they show like a mutilated face or something.
yeah, or like they go into the barn and that person's like flayed out or whatever, and it's like that's horrifying. Sure, it's like oh my god, that's
But there's flowers.
Still alive.
yeah, and he's still alive, and it's like oh my gosh, that's horrible. But it's like why though? You know, like I think that's if I express anything in this podcast. It's that the reason I don't like these things is not because it's like gruesome. Gruesomeness will never make me not like a movie. It's just when it happens and I don't know why it's happening and it seems superfluous and surface level. That's when I don't.
Oh
like
man,
it.
you sound exactly like my wife watching Marvel movies. This is Larissa being like, and now he's gonna punch him. Whoa, who cares?
But the thing about superhero movies is that often, like, yeah, okay, sometimes you have like fights where it's just like, oh, something cool happens because we want to have something cool happen. But often in superhero movies, you have people punching each other because there's a heavy emotional weight behind it.
Yeah, but why do they need to punch for like 10 minutes long? It's just because that genre, you want to see action.
Right. And again, there's nothing wrong with spectacle, but there has to be something underneath it.
But I'd say that both Ari Aster movies absolutely have that something underneath it. You're just not connecting with it. But like Hereditary does, Midsommar absolutely. Like when they're having the weird drug trip stuff, it's not just like, drug trip, dude. It's like, no, this is part of this journey, part of the story, part of the theme.
Oh, that's funny because I think the drug trip is a scene that sticks out in my mind as being mostly super. Like, why? What does she learn there? How does that advance the story at all beyond her just being kind of scared?
She's separating from like her reality. She's joining a different, not to say like dimension, but like she's just trying to avoid the reality of things at that
Yeah,
point.
You're right. She's in the upside down world. When you
But
go
she's
into
not trying to avoid it. She gets roped into it. She doesn't even want to take it.
No, but
well,
it's
that's hero's journey stuff. That's
Yeah.
the
I
debate.
guess so.
That's
Yeah, fair.
denying the call.
I would agree that Midsommar is a bit better in that regard. Like I said, but Hereditary lets me down.
I thought that Midsommar was better than Hereditary until I watched Wicker Man, and I realized so much of Midsommar is made up of everything that happens in Wicker Man.
Oh, yeah?
Not to say that, okay, here's the thing. If Ari Aster had said, yes, Midsommar was completely inspired by Wicker Man, I just wanted to make like a better, more modern version, I would have been like, okay, sure, yes, Ari, like you got this. This is a beautiful movie. But he literally said he specifically didn't look to Wicker Man for inspiration, and that kind of makes me mad. So
Well, maybe that's why it's just like Wicker Man, though, because he didn't know that he was repeating.
Yeah, and I mean, like,
No.
it's all based on pagan culture or like
yeah, but Wicker Man is the like quintessential example of the pagan movie era kind of thing.
fair enough. But it's like, though I can imagine that like he kind of came to the same conclusion from a separate route because like you read the same inspiration, you find like the top 5 pagan books, and you're like you both read the same ones, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll put this scene, I'll put this scene, I'll put this scene,
Yeah.
and like it starts to resemble each other.
It could happen, but even it sucks.
I haven't
that-
seen Wicker Man, so I
that
don't
could
know.
happen. But regardless of his attitude, it's kind of like I'm not mad that like very similar movies get made again and again. For example, the newest, The Invisible Man. The Invisible Man is just another Hollow Man. The Invisible Man is like a property that's been around since like the 30s or something.
Right.
There's all sorts of books and movies about it. There's screenplays that never got made. And the thing that's cool about The Invisible Man, the newest one, is that this time it's from the perspective of the victim instead of the perspective of the Invisible Man. And that's all you need to make it a fresh new take.
Right.
And so for Midsommar, it is one of those pagan movies, but instead of it being from like in Wicker Man, it's a cop trying to investigate this. Now it's from the perspective of the Maid Queen.
Yeah.
Which is before in the Wicker Man, he's just like, who is this Maid Queen? And he's like trying to find her and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So it's just, you just flip that and you have a new movie, and
Yeah.
he executed it brilliantly.
So which one
It's
do
a
you like?
beautiful
Which one do
movie.
you like better?
I remember when I walked out of Midsommar, I was like, Hereditary is better, but this is also very good. But now that I've seen them both twice, I think I like them both equally.
Interesting. I would say I like Hereditary more. I think I connect more with like the emotional side of it. Midsommar, I watched the first half pretty stoned with like at your place, and that was crazy. It was so emotional. And then the second half I just watched after I finished Hereditary. So I stayed up till 1, and I found like I was like
This isn't emotional at all.
it's really good, and it's so beautiful, and there's so much interesting stuff happening. But I also found that like there's a lot of it that I'm like, I just wish I was stoned watching this. Like if I wasn't stoned watching Midsommar, I just like,
See, but I don't think that's a hallmark of quality.
I think it is though. I think it's
I
just
wish
a
I was
different.
stoned right now.
No, but it's not about better or worse. It's just about like in the same way that her taking the drugs in the movie helps her disconnect from her reality, so she can then attach to their perspective, their culture. It's the same here, where you're able to just like let go of like a little bit of your anchoring into this world and like go along with that journey a little bit more.
And I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, but like I feel like I do that pretty easily regardless. Like I like
Apparently not.
and I think that's why I end up being disappointed by some of these movies, because I'm so in it that I want that journey to be full, you know, like I'm like going along with them. I'm feeling the emotions. I'm feeling the trauma, and I want there to be some sort of conclusion so that I can exit. And when that stuff doesn't happen, then I feel like I'm just kind of trapped in this in between.
He never exits. He's still in the house.
Exactly.
Did you feel that with Midsommar?
Midsommar was hard. You know, did I just say that I like Midsommar more than Hereditary?
You did say that.
I think that
They kind of end the same.
I might have to
eh?
say that they're around the same quality for me, but for different reasons. Like Hereditary builds up all this really cool emotional stuff, and like the themes of heredity and the family dysfunction and all that stuff. It like really does a great job of building that up. And Midsommar, I feel like I connected a lot less with the characters, but there is a more satisfying journey from start to end there. So I don't know. I think they're about the same then in that regard. One question I wanted to ask though was, you guys were talking about Wicker Man. Does Wicker Man sort of have that same? Well, I guess it's from a different perspective. But I thought one of the cool things about Midsommar is that it's this horror movie, but it's still. Like it's so bright
in the daytime.
It's so it's so beautiful, and it still manages to elicit this sense of dread, even without all these tropes of like the dark house and the lightning and thunder and stuff.
That's why I praised Midsommar to begin with. I was like, this is such a dark story, but like with such beautiful visuals. And I was like, I've never watched another horror movie like it in that regard. And then I started reading about it, and then a lot of the reviews were like, oh, this is just a new version of Wicker Man. So I was like, I need to watch Wicker Man now.
I think those reviews are, they fail because they use the word just. Because having seen both Wicker Men, they both fucking suck for different reasons. Like the 70s one is better, but it's so 70s and so weird, and the editing's so wacky, and there's
It reminded me of Jaws a lot.
The opening credits has like 3 songs, and they're wacky folkloric songs. We were like listening to the frickin' like lyrics of them, like, and it's boring and it sucks. And then the new one, the Nicolas Cage 2006 one, it sucks so bad. Dude, that bee scene isn't even in the goddamn movie. That's an alternate take that if you buy the Blu-ray or if you buy the DVD, you're not even getting that scene.
That's amazing.
You want to watch that? Oh, not the bees. You have to go to YouTube for that. I'm so disappointed, man.
That's so funny. Yeah, I think like it's such a reductive view to be like, this story's been told, so like anything that tells the same story is no good. Like Star Wars is a story that's been told a million times, and I bet you still like Star Wars.
He's telling it best, and the visuals are the best.
To be fair, like I still love Midsommar, and I would recommend it for sure. I think I just lost a little bit of respect for Ari Aster in that sense, where he didn't credit them.
Sure.
I'm excited to watch it again. I feel like there's so many layers to just unravel in all these movies that the more you watch, the more you get.
I want to bring back Get Out for a second, because I loved Get Out. Get Out is like I was so into it.
We have to cover Get Out.
Yeah, we definitely have to cover it on the podcast. But like, okay, we won't do spoilers, but like, there's way more of a fulfilling character arc in that to me. For sure. And, like they address the issues head on, literally and metaphorically. So I don't know. I'm just like, if Ari Aster, I already asked her, could write a movie that like had all of the quality that was in these movies in terms of the the set design and the cinematography and the music and all these little tiny background details. Like if he could take that and write a more fulfilling character story, that might be the best horror movie ever.
I think we're like seeing him on the upswing, because
first two movies
are both, and like
to be fair, Get Out was the first movie from Peele as well.
That's true. But he was writing before and doing other stuff. Yeah. And Ari Aster was as well, but like
shorts.
He came out of nowhere for most people, for me in particular. And so I'm very excited to see where he takes it.
Do you know what he's doing next?
I don't know. He has 10 scripts written that even before he started Hereditary, he had 10 movies that he wants to make in his life. And so we've seen 2. Who knows where he goes?
How many of them are about cults?
Right?
Apparently they're like cover a variety of genres.
Okay.
I feel that way too. I'm like, Ari Aster does follow these themes with like head trauma and family tragedy, cults.
Bring it on. I could do another one.
But
I'm ready for it to like evolve a little bit and change. Like I want to see, like you said, his technique and his eye and his taste in something totally different.
Oh. Okay, I just remembered something about Midsommar. I don't think we're going to do Midsommar now at this point, because we've already talked about it so much. But the other reason why I was so frustrated with Midsommar is because they don't leave. Like,
they can't. Where are they going to go?
There are so many times when they're like, this is not right. People are dying. People are disappearing. We know that this is a cult that kills people.
Well, they try to, and then they
Yeah.
Get the
die.
hell out of there.
can't
Where are
leave.
they going to go? They're in the middle of fucking nowhere.
The main characters don't.
They don't have
Riley,
they
and
I'm
don't
so
have
frustrated.
service. They don't have cell service.
No,
and
it's
they
not
can't
even
go
that though. It's not even that. There's two of them are there because they're academics and they want to study it. They don't want to leave before these ceremonies. And then Danny, when she says she wants to leave, she gets minimized. Her opinion gets devalued, and she says,
Totally.
"We should stay for this." And she goes, "Okay," because
Yeah.
that's her whole arc.
And the other two do try to leave and get killed for it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, what's his name? The guy from The Good Place.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
that weird-looking
he's
dude?
just a weird dude. And
Huh?
he's just a weird dude. He's hoping to get laid from some Swedish
Right,
chick.
yeah.
No. Sorry, not that guy. That guy's funny.
No.
I actually really liked it in Midsommar how funny it was
Mark.
because of that dude.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I thought that the seance part in Hereditary was supposed to be funny because I was like, that's
there's funny
I
in
laughed.
Midsommar.
But
He pees on the tree. Fuck.
Yeah,
I don't
oh
know.
my
It was just
gosh.
frustrating. Anyways, whatever.
But which guy? Which guy are you thinking that doesn't leave?
the guy, the black guy from The Good Place.
He
with the
wants to
glasses.
stay to study everything.
Yeah.
He's doing his dissertation.
But he didn't try to leave.
Why would he leave?
Well, yeah, he's found his life's purpose is to study it.
Anyway, I
frustrating.
think
I'm so angry.
we have to have some kind of consensus. Is it like Ari Aster?
Ari Aster.
Ari Aster.
Are you mixing A sounds? Anyway, I think that
Ari
he,
Aster.
to me, as someone who hasn't seen The Witch or The Babadook or other like modern horror like things that are really highly acclaimed, I'm sorry I haven't seen them, but in my limited view, I think Ari Aster is like king of horror right now. Way better than Mike Flanagan, who's like the Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor guy.
Yeah.
That guy's okay, and Doctor Sleep.
Yeah, it's
I liked Hill House, but Bly Manor's lame.
Yo, let's do Babadook because I hear that
haven't-
one's really good.
No,
really?
The Witch.
You're
The Witch.
saying this really?
I want to do The Witch so
Yeah,
bad.
I would way rather do
I
The
want-
Witch.
I love Robert Eggers.
100% down for The Witch and Babadook.
And
Oh my
Babadook.
God, what a twist!
Yeah.
This is crazy.
What do you mean?
We're
We
turning
became
Riley
a
into a
horror
horror fan.
podcast.
Like I said, I hear that they're good movies. I want to see them. I don't care what genre they are.
Yeah, but first, next week, we need to do Borat 2.
Yes, you may.
My life.
I'm so excited.
Oh my God, that's right, everybody. We are going to be watching Borat 2. The day it comes out is like, I think it's a Friday on Amazon Prime.
This Friday, 23rd.
Oh my God, that's what I'm doing this weekend. And we are going to be checking that out next week. Unfortunately, we wanted this to be the Halloween episode, but that's just not going to happen, I guess,
Yeah.
with Borat. But it sounds like we're going to be doing some horror things maybe monthly. And
Sure.
the tribe has spoken. We're doing Lord of the Rings.
Nice.
There's some debate internally
sorta
of whether or
happy.
not that includes like The Hobbit.
Yes.
Don't
You
bother.
You have to.
Don't bother.
Do we have to?
You absolutely have to.
David is clearly
Maybe later.
You can't
Hobbit
just like
fan.
pretend it doesn't have to be 3 episodes. If I was up to me, we would do Fellowship of the Ring, Hobbit 1, 2 Towers, Hobbit 2, 3. And then you're going good, bad, good, bad. You get to appreciate the bigger dynamics of it.
You know
but
what,
I'll
Riley?
settle
Hey.
for one super Hobbit episode.
David, I'll tell you right now, I'm not watching 3 Hobbit movies. If the first one sucks, I'm like, I share a house with another person. I can't be like, sorry, hon, 12 hours of shit.
You know what the problem is for me is that The Hobbit is like, to me, The Hobbit is like the sequel trilogy Star Wars movies. Like the prequels were bad, but there was enough good stuff in them that you're like, they're still part of the saga. You know, when you talk about the Star Wars saga, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. To me, like, and you can say
Okay.
it's 7, 8, 9 for better or for worse. But
The Hobbit
when I'm like,
is better than the prequel trilogy.
Is it?
It is better than the prequel trilogy.
Oh my God. Stop starting shit. Now
I've
we're
only seen the first one, and I thought this was as bad.
Neither of you have seen it. What do you know?
Nobody
What do
likes
you know?
I saw part of the second one or something.
It's so clear that the Lord of the Rings trilogy was like a goose that laid a golden egg, and then they were like, how can we put our forearm up this goose's ass and grab more money?
That's not true. It was gonna be so good.
Okay, wait.
And
This
then the
is,
last second,
wait,
they
this is
fucked
fake.
it all up.
This is content for the Lord of the Rings stuff. So let's not
All right, Lord of the Rings and horror and a couple other spicy ones in between. That's what we're doing in the future.
until theaters open again in 7
Never.
years.
You can reach us on Twitter at Carpool Critics. You can email us. Did you guys know? We have a new email address. Hello@Carpool Critics. Hello.
That was unplanned.
That became a thing.
All right. Bye-bye.
See you later. Love you.
Bye.